devil confessed to me that he's no longer what we should fear. The last confession I ever took was from the devil. He didn't come asking for forgiveness. He came to give a warning. It was a Tuesday, I think. The kind of unremarkable night where the city's glow swallows the stars whole, leaving the sky a sheet of bruised, empty purple. The 11th hour had chimed long ago, its lonely peal absorbed by the thick stone of St. Jude's. I was the only one left, a sentry in a silent fortress, nodding off in the confessional's stale, woody dark. That's when the other door creaked open. No footsteps preceded it. The cathedral's nave was a cavern of echoes. You could hear a mouse sneeze from 100 yards away. But this arrival was utterly silent. A void had opened in the world, and something had stepped through it and into the booth opposite mine. I jolted awake, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. I leaned toward the lattice screen, trying to pierce the oppressive gloom that had settled on the other side. A figure resolved itself from the shadows. Male, dressed in a suit so dark it seemed to pull the light into it, woven from thread that looked like solidified night. His hands rested on his knees, and the glint from the rings on his fingers wasn't the warm gleam of gold, but the cold, predatory shimmer of wet teeth. The light they cast on the ceiling twisted into shapes that were hideously familiar, like diagrams of parasites from a book I'd never read. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." The voice. It wasn't just smooth, it was foundational. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting, of a star being born, of a perfectly struck bell vibrating into infinity. It slid into my ear and unwound a sense of peace I hadn't earned. It has been, an age beyond ages, since my last confession. The manufactured calm shattered. The words were wrong. They hung in the air, heavy and ancient. "That's a long time, my son." A low chuckle, devoid of any warmth. It was the sound of grinding stone. You could say that, but then I suppose I ought to be direct. He shifted, and for a moment the shadows fell away just enough for me to see his eyes. They were the color of ancient, polished mahogany, but deep within them, something burned. Not a fire, but a cold, eternal ember of cosmic disappointment. "My name is Lucifer. I've had my share of the lost and the broken. I've listened to men who claimed to be Napoleon, to women who swore they were the Virgin Mary. A priest in a city this large becomes an unwilling psychiatrist. I opened my mouth to offer a gentle correction, to guide him back to the reality of his sins, but the words died in my throat. Because I knew. It wasn't a thought. It was knowledge that bypassed my brain and settled directly into my soul, cold and heavy as a block of lead. Every instinct I possessed, from the primate fear of a predator in the dark to the priest's intuition of the unholy, screamed at me. This was not a delusion. This was an appointment. The smell in the booth wasn't the usual scent of old wood and candle wax. It was ozone and cold, deep earth, the smell of a place that has never seen the sun. My mouth was a desert, my mind a vacant lot. The only words I could summon were those drilled into me by rote, a shield of habit against absolute terror. "And, what is it? You wish to confess?" He laughed again, that same hollow, grinding sound. It felt like it was sanding down the inside of the booth, of my own skull. An excellent question. I wasn't entirely sure myself until my feet carried me here. It seems even I am subject to impulses. He fell silent. The silence stretched, becoming a physical presence, a weight pressing in on me. My tongue felt thick, glued to the roof of my mouth. I was in a house of God, but for the first time in my life, I felt that the locks were on the outside. "I won't make the sign of the cross, if you don't mind," he finally said, his tone casual, almost bored. Professional courtesy. Of course, Lucifer. The name felt like a blasphemy on my lips, a key turning in a lock I never wanted to open. "What do you wish to confess?" I repeated, my voice a strained whisper. He bowed his head. The gesture was so profoundly, unnervingly human. It was the posture of a man humbled, of a child about to admit to a terrible mistake. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but seeing it on him, it was a perversion of nature. "I confess," he began, his voice dropping, losing its celestial timbre and taking on a rough, weary edge, "that hell is no longer mine." A fool's hope flared in my chest. "You mean it has been redeemed? That Christ has finally," that joyless laugh again, sharper this time. "Father, if the Nazarene had finally conquered my kingdom, I'd be chained to his throne, not sitting in this musty box talking to you." "No. It's worse, much worse." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Does it tell you something? That I almost wish that were the case." My blood ran cold. I waited, every nerve ending alight. "You know the story," he continued, a thread of ancient bitterness weaving through his words. "The rebellion, the fall. Your books get the broad strokes right, if not the nuance. I saw flaws in the design. I believed I could improve it. Is ambition a sin, Father, or is it a duty? When you see a universe being run by a sentimentalist, are you not obligated to try and seize the reins?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Even cast down, I made a kingdom from the rubble. I gave a throne to the dispossessed, and for millennia, it worked. My grand project. But then, your God played his ridiculous, humiliating trump card. He let himself be killed. A king, dying for his subjects. It was an absurdity. A fool's gambit." He leaned closer to the screen. I could feel the chill coming off him, a tangible wave of cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. His voice was a low, dangerous whisper. But it worked. I held my breath. The air in my lungs felt like it was freezing solid. The moment he walked out of that tomb, my authority crumbled. In the eyes of my legions, my judgment had been proven flawed. I, the great adversary, had been outmaneuvered. How can you rule demons when you've lost your credibility? They called me the Lord of Lies, but they only followed me because they believed my one great truth, that God was weak. And he had just proven otherwise. He sighed, a sound like dust settling on a forgotten tomb. Asmodeus was the first to turn. He took the circles of lust with him, declared them a neutral territory. Belphegor followed, rallying the slothful and the bitter. It was a cascade. Hell became a free-for-all, a century-long civil war fought in trenches carved through fields of screaming souls. I became a king without a country, watching from my empty citadel as my former subjects tore each other to pieces over scraps of my ruined empire. I had fallen once from heaven. Now I had fallen again in my own home. There is no poetry for that kind of failure. He stopped. The silence that followed was different. It was heavier, freighted with a coming revelation that I felt in my teeth, a high-frequency vibration of wrongness. A primitive, animal part of my brain screamed at me to run, to claw my way out of the booth and never stop. It knew, somehow, that hearing what came next was a form of damnation in itself. In my arrogance, I stayed, I listened, and I sealed my fate. "Father," his voice was barely audible, stripped of all its power, leaving only a raw, naked thing behind. "Are you aware of the spaces between things? Not the darkness of a night sky, but the true dark. The gaps in the foundation of reality. The places God walled off before he even said, 'Let there be light.'" I saw him look down at his hands, at the rings that glinted like chips of frozen starlight. They were whispers at first. Apocryphal texts even my librarians had deemed too dangerous to archive. Rumors of powers that predated the word. Beings that slept in the stillness before creation. I was desperate. My kingdom was ash. So I went looking. He looked up, and his eyes found mine through the screen, and for the first time, I saw it. Beneath the pride, beneath the bitterness, deep in the core of his ancient being, was an emotion I never thought to see there. Fear. Raw, undiluted, soul-shattering fear. I descended, he breathed, past the lowest pits of hell, through the bedrock of existence itself, and I found them. I found things. Things for which we have no names, because names are a form of order, and these beings are the antithesis of order. They are the universe's autoimmune disorder. primal, mindless engines of dissolution. They don't want to rule. They don't want to conquer. They simply want to unmake. To pull every atom, every soul, every stray thought back into the screaming, chaotic static from which it all arose. His voice hitched, a dry, rasping sound. I thought I could control them. A madman's dream. I thought I could aim them at my enemies, at heaven itself. I went back to my squabbling princes and warned them. I told them what I had found, what power I could unleash. They laughed at me, called me broken. They thought I had finally lost my mind. As he spoke, the air in the church grew thin, pressurized. I felt 1,000 unseen points of attention focusing on me, a crushing weight of alien perception. By listening, by knowing, I had made myself visible to them. He looked at his hands again, as if he couldn't bear to look at me. So I did it. His voice was a single, desolate note. I opened the door. I woke them up. My mind buckled. I wasn't in the booth anymore. I was cast adrift in a black, silent ocean. I saw it. I saw hell, not burning, but being erased. Fortresses of obsidian and bone didn't explode. They simply ceased to be, their matter unwoven thread by thread. Legions of demons didn't scream their forms, and consciousness were pulled apart into constituent, meaningless energies. It was a silent, passionless, perfect apocalypse, and I felt the hunger behind it. A void that was not empty, but was an active, ravenous state of non-being. It was the absolute and eternal end of is-as. Then, just as suddenly, I was back in the suffocating dark of the booth, gasping, cold sweat plastering my cassock to my skin. Lucifer was still talking, his voice trembling slightly. All I ever wanted was his throne. I thought I could be a better god. Kinder, perhaps. More honest. Now, he made a gesture of utter helplessness. Now those things are sovereign in hell. They have consumed it all. And they are not sated. They are never sated. Heaven and earth, they're just the rest of the meal. He fell silent. The confession was over. The sin was not pride. It was not rebellion. It was this. He had murdered creation out of spite. I am sorry, Father, he said, and the sincerity in his voice was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. I wanted to rule the world. Now I am cursed to be its sole mourner. I will be the last one standing when the gates of heaven are devoured by rust and the corpses of angels pave the silver streets. I will be the lone witness to the creation of God himself. That is my penance, a throne of ash in a kingdom of nothing. I sat there, paralyzed, a hollowed-out thing. What absolution could I offer for a sin of that magnitude? What penance? When I finally forced myself to look through the screen again, he was gone. I scrambled out of my side of the booth, my legs shaking. The other door was closed. I threw it open, empty. The crushing presence was gone, but the vacuum it left behind was a horror all its own. The main doors of the cathedral were still bolted from the inside. He hadn't walked out. He had simply ceased to be there. I don't remember getting home. The next thing I knew, I was waking up from a dream that felt more real than my own life. I was standing in a churning chaos of impossible forms. Creatures with too many limbs and wings made of screaming faces. Beings that were concentric, spinning rings of razors and eyes, all moving as one vast, mindless organism. I stood on a throne of black stone that crumbled under my own weight, my body cracking and dissolving like dried mud, my blood turning to vapor before it could even fall. And when there was nothing left of me, or the throne or the chaos, they left. The void that remained was absolute. And in that freezing, silent, eternal nothing, I stayed. Then I woke up. I am not a prophet. I am not a saint. I am a man who has had his sanity peeled back like skin from a fruit, forced to see the rot at the core of everything. The world outside my window looks thin, brittle, like a photograph that's about to fade completely. The devil promised they would ascend. He wasn't boasting. He was terrified. And now, so am I. I sit in the dark and I listen. I wait for the silence to begin. I wait for the day the Lord of Hell promised would come, with fear in his ancient burning eyes.